Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Alan Collinge. You're the founder of StudentLoanJustice.org. And during this pandemic, when millions are getting laid off, the numbers now are 36 million without that have filed unemployment claims. Student loans is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. There have been some measures taken for temporary relief for student loans, but definitely no student loan cancellations, which Bernie Sanders has called for. So kind of seems like at the beginning of beginning of the pandemic, you launched a petition to cancel student loans. I'll let you describe it because it's gathered a lot of steam.
Sure. Well, even well before the coronavirus crisis, this was, I have to say, a failed lending system. The most recent COO of the federal lending program, A. Wayne Johnson, he resigned after 7 months on the job. He said, I quit. This lending system is broke. We need, and he's a Trump Republican appointee, by the way. He said, we're going to need widespread loan cancellation. And, oh, by the way, bankruptcy protections must be returned to the loans that remain. For the first 15 years of our existence, we fought very moderately for only the return of the same bankruptcy rights that every other borrower for every other type of loan has, to no avail. Congress just refuses to budge on the issue. And so now I have to say, I agree with Wayne Johnson. It's a failed lending system. According to Johnson, 80% of all federal student loan borrowers will never be able to repay their loans. They're either in default, forbearance, deferment, they're delinquent, or they're paying and their balance is going up. And so, this thing has gone off the rails. And, quite frankly, this was true even 2 or 3 years ago. So when this crisis happened and we see trillions upon trillions of dollars being funneled again to the banks, to big and small businesses, and to others, this 43,000 millionaire tax stimulus of an average of 1.6 million apiece, in that context, the concept of canceling student loans looks better and better. Now, the key thing that I'll tell you, Jordan, is that these loans don't need to be paid for. So, in other words, Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and others, the liberals in Congress, they're calling for a tax on the wealthy and raise $2 trillion, give the money to the Department of Education so they can cancel the loans. Well, that's nonsense. The taxpayer has already paid for these loans many years ago. So the president could cancel these loans by executive order without needing congressional approval, without needing any congressional appropriation, and without adding even a penny to the national debt. And because the lending system is so profitable over the years, it turns out the amount of sort of unpaid principal of the 1.5 trillion outstanding federal student loans, it's only somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 or $400 billion. And so taking the couple steps back and looking at the long view, the president could cancel all of these loans by executive order, and the taxpayers on balance would be breaking about even, or maybe even making a little bit of money. I don't know. So in terms of fiscal stimulus, this is a no-brainer. This is the lowest hanging fruit on the tree.
And what do you say to the devil's advocate position and people that say, well, I paid my loans back. Why should people get a, quote, free ride? Which in reality is, the politicians won't do it because they're masters on Wall Street on the loans.
Well, to the people who were able to successfully repay their loans, I say congratulations to you. If I had a merit badge, I would give it to them. But quite frankly, Jordan, this isn't about them. This is about a big government lending monstrosity that 80% of all borrowers will never be able to repay. Now, I'm sure among the last generation of slaves, there were probably a few old guys that were like, what? That ain't right, But, what do you say to that? I don't know what to tell them. But I can tell you that if we need fiscal stimulus, this absolutely needs to happen. And if we want to, hearken the spirit and wisdom of the founding fathers, who they themselves were being bludgeoned under debt to British banks and merchants, and who they themselves called for bankruptcy laws ahead of the power to declare war and raise an army, then they would see things maybe in a little different context. And, one more thing, Jordan, I'll say. I know it's very popular to wag your finger at the students, look at these snowflakes, these liberal pansies, and I get that. That there's a certain amount of truth to those comments. But I will only say that, you can wag your finger at the students, but really all that accomplishes is enabling the worst big government lending monstrosity that is funneling trillions of dollars to colleges and universities who, quite frankly, don't deserve it. And what they do with that money is, even a lot of the time, exacerbate the liberal and other, underpinnings that most people who, would scorn the student loan borrowers, they themselves cannot stand. So really, by wagging your fingers at the borrowers, you're really enabling a big government liberal educational feeding frenzy. And I would think that most people, once they thought about it, would realize that that's probably not the right view to take.
And also, when you look at other countries, Denmark, there was just a big piece in the New York Times about Denmark's better outcomes than us. Yes, they have higher costs, but on average, their salaries they make more money than people in the United States, and they have these built universal health care, universal education, without it costing $1 billion to go to college. And everybody starts kind of from the same place in education because it's provided. So you don't have these discrepancies like you do in the United States, where for a lot of black people, brown people, poor white people, indigenous people, kind of stops after high school. Most of them can't even afford to go to college, even public colleges. So this would obviously this doesn't this doesn't make colleges free, which I think public colleges should be free. But at the very least, if you don't have to take out massive loans to go to college, it could open the floodgates for more people to get an education.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I would only add that it is the presence of this, I'm sorry, but it is a big government lending monstrosity. It's the most predatory lending system on earth. It is the presence of this thing that is causing the price of college to hyperinflate. And, there's no good reason for that. College should be, if not free, it should at least be no more expensive than it was in the 60s or 70s. And I think ending this lending system is a good first place to start. I would almost go so far as to say, if there ends up being any shortfall to the taxpayer, probably you want to claw that back from the universities, quite frankly, because they are more awash in liquid cash than they have ever been in the history of this country. And they don't really need that. Who needs lazy rivers and Class A architecture and 3-star, 4-star banquet facilities for the students? Students really don't care. You could throw up cement slab dorm rooms like people of my age were living in, and that's fine. The students they can roll with the punches. They don't need all the largesse.
I think it's interesting because your petition has about 240,000 signatures. Pretty impressive that you were able to do that. I think we're in a political moment where Biden, recent polls show, is really struggling with people under 50. Well, let's not say really struggling, but he's actually on par with Trump. Somehow Trump is doing equal, if not better, in some polls with voters under 50. When you break it down even further, millennials, 18 to 33, most affected by these student loan monstrosities. Biden's not doing so hot. My view is, Trump's main ideology is Trump. So if he sees himself down, in critical states by 7 to 10 points come summer, I could see him moving left and just throwing up his hands and saying, you know what, we're canceling student loan debt. Whether he means it or not, who knows? But do you think, I kind of feel lukewarm about petitions generally working, but do you feel if you could get organized and get more signatures on this and more of a real aggressive, movement here for student loan cancellation, it might convince a desperate president looking for re-election?
Well, I think it should. I think if they are looking at the demographics behind this at all, they realize, there's 55 million people in the country with student loans. 80% of them are losing sleep on these loans, and they are certainly not all liberal. They run the spectrum. So that's 44 million people, and the presidential candidate that offers them something real will reap this windfall. This is the Wild West of politics. It truly is. You name any other issue, healthcare, gun control, immigration, etc. I will show you a very well-defined issue around which the battle lines are clearly drawn. Student loans is nobody has been able to wrap their arms around this and draw battle lines and define this issue well. So there is a huge electoral treasure to be had for a candidate that addresses the issue in a meaningful way. And frankly, what we've seen from Biden is not very believable. Biden has been very close with the banks over his career, and I've been following him around for many months here in Iowa, and he's just not very credible. But nonetheless, right now, on balance, I would say that he has the stronger student loan proposal. Now, you said Trump will move left, but canceling student loans is really the conservative thing to do. I mean, anybody who is concerned about big government, anybody who's concerned with the liberal colleges, and we are an apolitical group. I take no stand there. But anybody who says they are concerned with what the colleges are doing to our young people, etc., they should see that there is a very rational and strong conservative basis for ending this lending system. Grover Norquist himself said, government should be small enough so that if you had to, you could take it to the bathroom and drown in the tub. Well, Grover, look at us. This is exactly where we are at with the student loan program. The federal government profits somewhere between 50, 60, 70 billion dollars a year on this program, at least on paper. And a lot of that money is plowed back into Obamacare and so forth. So there's a lot not to like about the federal lending system if you're conservative. And we're seeing people like A. Wayne Johnson, very ahead of the curve conservative Republicans, start to finally recognize this. And I hope that Trump will, whether he does it before the election or not. I think that very well could decide the election.
Where can people sign your petition and find out more?
Sure, they can always go to studentloanjustice.org and find the petition that way. They go to change.org and search student loans, and we'll probably be the first one popping up. Join us on Facebook, whatever we can do, because if I've learned nothing else over the past 15 years, nobody is going to win this battle for us. The people, the borrowers themselves, have to own this problem and step up and do the small amount of work necessary to get it solved.
Thank you, Alan Collinge from studentloanjustice.org. Let's keep in touch. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.